It was getting dark. The sun hung low in the sky behind the mountains and all was in shadow. We'd been turned away from every town instead we came across. There was famine in the hollers, and we had mouths to feed. Well, I reckon camping in the hills is preferable to sleeping while surrounded by those kin-fucking bastards, Cassidy grumbled, her chain softly creaking as she pedaled. Risking waking to find it's harder to walk and easier to shit. Oh, good lord. Supposing we were to wake without our throats cut. Quit being bitter, I said over my shoulder. Let's just try and find somewhere safe to camp before we get bogged down with hypothetical buggery and murder. And so we rode into the shadows, our headlights hardly cutting through the mist blanketing the shy looms. This was a place of rust and decay, with ancient railroad trestles looming overhead and collapsing tunnels punching through the mountainsides like bullet holes. The last town we passed was built beneath one such old bridge, and a lookout with a rifle was sequestered in the crook of two supports. He must not realize the glow of a cigarette gives him away. I'd rather play blackjack, Cassidy said after a while. Swell idea, dear. Get bent, Jack, she said with a smile in her voice. The trees dripped with old man's beard. Little yellow lights shone in the gloom, but it was tough to discern if they were fireflies or eyeshine. But something was out there, watching. I could feel it. It was as if we moved through a predatory landscape, the air baited. I came to a halt and angled my headlight into the brush. Cassidy stopped beside me and did the same. What is it? She whispered warily, leering into the gloom. That's a trail, I said. It was overgrown from long disuse, but there was a definite space where the undergrowth was thinner, as if it had once been cleared. My guess is that it leads to some kind of cabin higher up. She relaxed. Likely to be occupied by an individual who'd delight in cannibalizing us. She gestured to the various rusty hunting traps hanging on chains from a tree like some kind of grisly mobile. We're both armed, I replied, surveying the dishonorable implements with distaste. As he'll undoubtedly fucking be as well, she said pointedly, and be liable to descend upon us howling from the fucking trees. Are you saying you'd rather we not take a look-see and just sleep outside? Again? Hell no, she scoffed. I'd be glad to sleep indoors. I'm just making a point of how much I dislike the fucking locals. They're people like anywhere else, I commented. My fucking point exactly. We came upon a cabin surrounded by a barbed wire fence. Its white paint was peeling, and the pale blue tin roof was streaked with rust. Now this is terrific, Cassidy whispered gratefully as she lifted open the simple wood gate, drawing her long-barreled black revolver. I concurred. Now here's hoping it was unoccupied. Leaving her bike at the foot of the uneven steps, she crept up the porch and, in a crouch, made her way to the front window. Down her sights, she slowly peered inside. With her black hat and coat trailing behind her, she looked like a wraith. Colorless. Pale skin, black hair, black and white clothes, black gun. The only color was from leather, and the fading red, white, and blue on her belt buckle. I was hardly a dandy, but I tried to have some variety in what I wore. She says I dress like a queer lumberjack, which I take for roundabout praise. Place is vacant, I reckon, she said, rising to her feet like an apparition. The dust is yay high. She made a gesture as if presenting a revolver as a vigorous erection. I just stared at her, blank-faced, as she grinned, raising her thick eyebrows lasciviously. Eventually, she cracked and twirled her revolver as easily as snapping a finger before holstering it, saying, Say, I'm starting to think you have problems down there, 'cause you don't find dick jokes funny, and that just ain't normal. She raised an accusing brow and twisted her mouth skeptically. Say, I'm starting to think maybe you're a femme-faced boy, 'cause you don't have tits to speak of, and you talk about dicks with disturbing regularity. I merely appreciate the comedy of the layman, she said haughtily as she opened the squeaky outer screen door and kicked the inner. I winced, and I was about to caution, careful, but the door squealed on its derelict hinges and swung open with relative ease, dragging along the well-scraped puncheon floor. No, that's the comedy of a juvenile dipshit. I lifted the bikes under my arms and carried them up the rickety steps. That, or you're a simple degenerate who mistakes vulgarity for humor. Cassidy held the door open and gave me a sardonic, shit-eating grin as I wheeled the bikes inside. And fucking proud. Now that I thought about it, the jokes were simply an extension of how she regularly spoke. The screen door clacked loudly as it closed itself, making me wince. Maybe it's a good thing we got turned away, 'cause now we can eat some fucking food without getting murdered for it, she said, kicking the ill-fitting door shut. You should make some hoppin' john. I much prefer that to the piss-soaked groats and man-flesh so beloved by the folk round these parts. Sure, grab the stuff while I get a fire going. There was a stack of firewood and kindling beside the stove already, so by the time she brought me our ingredients, I had one lit. As I started cooking, Cassidy put her coat on the back of a chair and began to clean and loot the place, dusting off the dinner table and going through the cabinets. Huh, this is real friggin' peculiar, she remarked, squatting in front of a chest beside her writing desk. She had one of the drawstring sacks with her and had been tossing random things in as she went. I asked as I broke the fatty pemmican apart in the simmering rice and black beans. While it may be a bastardization of the dish, it was a damn good, hearty trail meal, if bland and depressing when unseasoned. Alas, my box of seasoning was running low. I couldn't help but recall the dirty faces of the kids I'd seen in these hills. I wished we could have given them something, but to reveal our stocks was to invite bushwhacking. I didn't want to make them orphans. And, as hard as it was to reconcile with, I prioritized our eating. That was the true deciding factor. I'd have figured that if someone were to abandon their cabin, they'd take some belongings with them. She looked up at me, gesturing into the chest. I've got a backpack, field supplies, and some miscellaneous effects I'd expect to be gone. She lifted up a compass and cordage, then put them in the loot sack. Maybe the fellow who lived here got killed while out. No, all his friggin' kit's in here. I just told you, she said, tapping the chest with the tips of her fingers, then realized. The door was locked from the inside. Was it, or was the door just stuck? I asked. Nah, the latch is broken, look. She pointed to the hole in the frame. I walked over to it. The hole was perfectly clean. There were only some scratches around it from the hook. The eye wasn't torn from the wall. It was unscrewed. Guess you were right. It's at your feet, Cassidy said darkly. I looked down and, sure enough, a dingy screw with a hoop on the end was lying right beside the toe of my boot. I crouched down and picked it up. The metal was rusty and dusty all around. Well, if someone or something was here with design on us, we'd have found out by now, Cassidy declared with bright fatalism, bouncing to her feet. Still, she drew her gun again and went to the rightmost of the two rooms at the back of the cabin. Holding the black revolver across her chest, she gave a swift kick to the timber door. Unlike the front door, this swung smoothly, and she startled herself as the hinges screeched and the door gave a thunderous smack against the wall, rattling the dry boards. The hinges squealed as if they were laughing at her as the door jerkily recoiled. Dust fell from the ceiling and sprinkled her hat. Well, fuck me, she chuckled awkwardly, looking back with wide raccoony eyes. Don't I look like a damn fool? Yeah, I said sardonically, and that little display didn't help. Her brows furrowed. Bite me, Jack. Let me fatten you up first so I can do more than gnaw, I said, brushing a blonde lock back behind my ears. I leaned over the pot and wafted the steam. The smell made my stomach pang in anticipation. You're one to talk, she said indignantly. How many fucking notches have you put in your belt since we left? I take your point. I held my hands up in surrender, not having meant to strike a nerve. That wasn't a jibe, just idle idiocy. That describes most of your fucking behaviors, idle or otherwise. She turned and pushed the left door open, and froze in her tracks, slowly holstering the black revolver. Jack, she said, not turning away. Come take a gander at this. I set my ladle aside and went to look over her shoulder. I fear I've found the previous occupant, she said. Yeah. I took the hoppin' john off the stove, and we gathered the bones in their blanket. It crunched where the blood had soaked in. The mattress was greasy, black, red, and a sickly yellow from death decay, and was peppered with desiccated insects. I flipped it over, but the fluids had wholly saturated the mattress. There was a stain on the floor. Cassidy set the blanket of bones back on the bed, and we resolved to close the door and leave it at that. That wasn't a natural death, nor a suicide, I said as we sat down at the table. Kelly's long gone now, she replied around a mouthful of meat. Your manners are lacking, Cass. I don't like people's table manners, she said, shaking her head. She swallowed. That really puts you off eating food. The greasy stain on the mattress felt the same as the inside of the pemmican bag. The beans looked like organs, and the rice like maggots in the ground meat. That put me off eating. She wolfed hers down. I felt somewhat ashamed of my reluctance, bearing in mind I may have condemned others by keeping our food to ourselves. You know, if we're going to try Happy Land tomorrow, you might want to cover your stars and bars, I said, in reference to her belt buckle as I rooted through my meal, not meeting her eye. I'd put off broaching that particular subject as long as was possible. Nope, she said firmly, an edge to her voice. Fuck the government and fuck their laws. It's a symbol of the people, and if I take it off, then those be cunted fuckers and mothers have it all to themselves. I blinked, momentarily rendered speechless by her vulgar eloquence. Well, it's something else entirely for the Maroons, I commented lightly. Okay. She ducked her head and shrugged with a what's-your-point look. I am not Negro, she said, speaking like I was a retarded child. Evidently no, I wryly observed, gesturing to her pallor with my camp spork. Far from it, you're the color of milk, and that's why, if you wear the chameleon flag, any Negroes are liable to shoot you for a slaver. And I wouldn't blame them, regardless of the buckle, giving you causticity. Her glare turned steely. You can't deny they have good reason, I said in a pitiful attempt at it. And I don't, she said. But why should I fetter myself for their fucking comfort? That's not very rock and roll. They see it for what the clannish cocksuckers perverted it into. A perversion I resist by giving the rebel flag a proper cause to fly for. It's not for their comfort, it's for yours, because they'll shoot you if you don't. My spork idly scraped at the tin dish. It's their land. You should respect their beliefs. Why does me respecting their beliefs take fucking precedence over them respecting mine because of fucking geography? She spat scornfully. Should they have respected being made into slaves because it was in fucking Chameleon where the evil was denied by the powers that be? Don't ask me deliberately stupid questions because you know I'm not fool enough to conjure a moron's answer. She snorted, rolling her silvery eyes. For what it's worth, I agree with you. It should be a symbol of the people, I acquiesced. But they aren't going to think, oh, that whitey blue-eyed devil, your eyes are blue, not mine, numb nuts, she grumbled sarcastically under her breath, folding her arms over her chest. I plowed on, is wearing the chameleon flag on an anti-authoritarian and reclamatory display. They're gonna see some scrawny, pale-faced rap. How about, she interjected, raising a thin, calloused finger in proposition. I ride up and say, howdy, Freeman, I am emphatically not a Klanist, and if they don't want to talk or are too fucking blind to notice I wear it upside down, for a fucking reason, I can outdraw them. She settled back in her chair and drummed her hands on the table, biting her bottom lip and raising her thick eyebrows as if to say, how you like them apples? I scoffed. Boy, that'll show 'em. I didn't say kill them, just shoot a finger off through their barrel, she said as if it was perfectly rational. Because if they decide to draw on me without provocation besides their fucking presumption of my beliefs, instead of granting me an opportunity to articulate what I believed like civilized fucking people, they are prejudiced and hypocritical cocksuckers who deserve to be shot a few fucking times. Their dipshit fucking thought process is no different than that of the imbecilic motherfuckers who sullied the stars and bars in the first fucking place, she exclaimed, banging a fist on the table and making our dishes jump. And it's the rebel flag, motherfucker! I slowly chewed my Hoppin' John like cud as she stared at me, eyes glittering dangerously, her chest rising and falling more slowly as her guns cooled. I could imagine Cassidy being shot to shreds by a Happy Land chopper squad, but I supposed my ask was akin to being made to cut my hair. Death of self or death of body? What would I prefer? Conformity or integrity? Whatever allowed me to live to fight another day. I swallowed deliberately and spoke evenly. You're a real lame brain sometimes, you know that? Suck my fucking nuts, I sighed in exasperation. Again with the dicks. I said nuts, she cried. Just stifle, I groaned, wearily rubbing my face. My hands felt gritty, and my face greasy beneath the pale scruff. Why not open with, I rode for the Underground Railroad, or I killed the Nighthawk, the infamous Carl Beto, no less, before you explain and reveal your buckle to him? She shrugged. I know. She clicked her tongue. Because I shouldn't fucking have to? Well, I won't press the issue. There's no point advising you, I surrendered. You'll never do what I say. Exactly, she nodded definitively. And fuck you for trying to make me. I do what I want, when I want. Have you ever figured that? As a friend who, for reasons unknown even to himself, holds you dear, I have your best interests at heart? I asked, pointing at her with my spork and accidentally flinging bits of rice. And I'm merely concerned for your well-being? Yes, and? Then why are you so goddamn obstinate, Cass? She chewed ponderously, glancing up and to the side as she gathered her thoughts and savored her last bite. There's one piece of advice I've always remembered, she said philosophically around the thoroughly masticated mouthful. Of course, she swallowed. I don't follow it, but I do always pass it on to others whenever an opportunity is presented. And what is this sage wisdom? I rolled my hand for her to get on with it. She pointed to the heavens above and recited the adage, Shut the fuck up and go fuck yourself. Ah, I nodded knowingly, being quite familiar with the expression. I devise my own refrain, which shares the same general principles, and that is, she cleared her throat, any problem you can say fuck you to isn't worth worrying about. Thus far, I haven't encountered any situation where it has not been applicable, nor anyone nor thing I couldn't say it to with my whole fucking chest. She jabbed a finger in my face, leaning over the table as to be nose to nose with me. If you call me flat, I'm gonna cut your fucking balls off. I quickly changed tack and went with, Gee, a dick fixation again. I shook my head in dismay, playing at a loss. For your information, a smaller bust helps in a fight. It gives you mobility, she said primly. I am streamlined for combat. I bowed my head. I defer to your expertise. I supposed when you could shoot a bottle cap out of the air, your weight class was effectively null. Nevertheless, I would rise for it at any opportunity. That's just how these things are. That is to my advantage, and you shan't offend me, asshole. I'm far too fucking above such petty insecurity. Whereas you, she gave a vague gesture to all of me, and your adversity to the subject of cocks and what's associated conveys a major fucking deficiency, but I digress, which is appreciated. Regarding Happyland, she went on with her monologue, much to my chagrin, her tone turning stern. Under the principles of freedom, liberty, and equality to which I subscribe, the opinions of others regarding my fucking buckle are of no import because it is my fucking buckle. If they take umbrage, that's their fucking problem. Now, about you mother henning me, rapscallion bastard, have you ever been punched very hard in the face? That seemed out of left field. As a matter of fact, I have, I replied cautiously. Whipped in the street with a belt by a complete stranger? I felt my stomach sink. In the street, that I cannot say. Well, I have, among a myriad of other shitty things, she said frankly. And I survived out of sheer fucking obstinacy. She paused, her silver eyes gleaming, then leaned back in her chair and gave me a woven smile. So, I reckon my way of things works just fucking fine. Refuge and audacity, I conceded, sticking out my foot and giving the bottom of her chair a little nudge with the toe of my boot. Her eyes sparkled in such a way as to say she appreciated the phrase, but her cocky grin disappeared and her eyes went wide as she slowly tilted back. She waved her arms and got off a furious cocksucker before she toppled to the floor with a thump and a puff of dust. Oof. I feigned a wince and sucked my teeth. That was gnarly. You alright? Kiss my ass, you rapscallion fucking bastard, she hissed, extending her twiggy legs into the air. There isn't much there either. I fart in your general fucking direction. In that case, I said, rising from my seat, I'm gonna finish this before I lose my meal to your repellency. The air that was in my butt is now in your lungs, she declared, still lying on the floor. And once I'm done, I'm gonna hit the hay. I proceeded to shovel the remaining hopping john into my mouth. I had to force myself to chew in spite of my mental rebellion, knowing the meal was precious and I desperately needed the fuel. The scarcity of game around here unnerved me. The simple fact of the absence alone, and because what food we carried would inevitably run out. The gate guards had mentioned rumors of cannibalism deeper in the mountains to the northeast. I dismissed them until I saw, or rather didn't see, the lack of animals to hunt. I was glad we were heading north and west. "What, no blackjack?" Cassidy asked disappointedly, rolling to the side and springing to her feet. I was scarfing, trying not to feel ill while doing so, and her puppy dog eyes turned into a look of condescending bemusement. "I guess the day's riggers has you tuckered out, you fat bastard." With a flick of my wrist, I threw the empty tin at her. She caught it with ease. "Yeah, so you're gonna do the dishes." I think I'd pass out from exhaustion. "That's woman's work," she said scornfully. Cassie K was no man's scullion wench. "I get the mattress then." "You bet," I shrugged. "Blackjack in the morning, before we set out?" "For sure." As I lay in my sleeping bag, I became acutely aware of the sounds around me and of the niggling woes and ringing in my ears. I hate lying alone in the dark with my thoughts, of the people starving in the hills, of cannibals prowling the fog, the people we couldn't help get out. What happened to the dead man who'd once called this cabin home? Did he feel lonely when he died? The inexorable cruelty of life and the unfairness and inevitability of death. And what was there to do? Nothing. And I'm alone, and sad, and afraid. I didn't quite know Cassidy was feeling along the same lines, curled up in the bedroom. I wished we'd camped outside. The cabin may be safer, but sleeping back to back beside a warm fire with a friend brought me a greater sense of security. The rustle of the trees, the creaking of the timbers, they lulled me to an uneasy sleep. I missed the sound of her breathing. I couldn't hear my own, only the haunting whistle of the cold mountain wind. Time passed, and my eyes flicked open to a scratching. Claws. A small animal at the door. I kicked a heel down on the dusty floor and muttered, "I've nothing for you, beast." Cassidy must not have cleaned our dishes as well as I usually do despite having a pump and sink. As I resolved to give her guff about it in the morning, I failed to register the long claw sliding through the gap between door and frame, scratching at the screw hole. It felt around but was unable to reach the chair. I slept more soundly inside than out, another drawback of the cabin's supposed security. The creature paused at the sound of my voice and slowly retracted its viciously sharp claw. With nary a sound, it hopped down from the porch and padded along the side of the cabin. Others watched as it leapt up, balancing on the windowsill. Out came the creature's claws again, sliding under the window. It resisted, but the powerful muscles in the creature's arms and hands forced it up slowly but surely. It crept inside. Cassidy lay in her sleeping bag on top of the musty mattress, curled in the fetal position with her clothes beside her and gun belt hanging from the headboard. The creature dropped to the floor and slinked across the room, climbing up the foot of the bed. "My tail," it hissed, crawling over her. "Is that what you've come for, interloper?" As she felt its weight on her feet, Cassidy's eyes flicked open in shock. They met those of the creature, gleaming mere feet from her own. "Great fucking spirit!" she shouted, twisting and kicking with both legs, sending the heavy beast flying across the room and into the far wall. Cassidy flailed, disentangling herself from the bag and grasping for her gun as it caterwauled, jumping to the foot of the bed. It squatted like a monkey and bore its fangs in a hiss. She felt the familiar walnut grip and yanked the weapon from its holster, hastily taking aim and firing into the dark. The creature yowled and fell back. Cassidy couldn't see it, but she'd nicked its ear. It grabbed her hat from the bedpost with its bushy ringed tail and sprang out the window. "The fuck?" she cried in utter confusion and went in pursuit, vaulting through the window and falling roughly to the ground with a grunt. Yellow eyes glared malevolently from the woods. She heard the creature to her right and fired blind. The ground exploded just behind it, and it jumped to the left and bounded up the barbed wire fence. Cassidy scrambled to give chase, sending off another wild shot that severed flesh and reverberated through the woods. About to leap from the top of the fence, the creature toppled forward with an agonized shriek and writhed off into the brush, wailing like the damned. The cries are met with a chorus of furious hissing and caterwauling as the tail and hat fell to the ground. Cassidy dashed forward and, as she hastened to snatch it, her bare foot slipped in a rut and she tripped face first into the barbed wire. It sliced clean through her mouth and cheek. She hardly felt a thing. She grasped her hat and fixed it to her head, also plucking up the tail before sprinting back to the cabin. By now, I'd run to her room, my .38 in hand, to see it empty, then ran back out, flung the chair aside, and the door open just in time to see her fan the hammer at something behind her before flying up the steps. My heart skipped a beat as I saw the glistening blood painting her lower face, for a terrifying moment fearing her throat had been cut. She slid past me and I slammed the door, jamming the chair back in place. The unknown animals were screaming and chattering in the trees all around us.
"Some fucking critter absconded with my hat,"
she slurred around the blood in her mouth, causing it to run down her chin and neck to her jugular notch. Her chest glimmered like a lake at sunset in the faint firelight from the stove. It was different than the sheen of her sweat. Her ratty tank top was nearly stained down to her midriff.
"Got this though. Didn't even mean to,"
she said proudly, unsteadily raising the tail like a prized fish.
"Gonna fix it in my handlebars."
She raised a jittering hand to wipe her mouth and winced at the touch.
"No,"
she hissed, and saw the blood, then looked down at her torso, then at me.
"How bad?"
she asked. Her voice didn't betray her fear, but her eyes did. "Well, not good," I said evenly, pocketing my weapon. I grabbed my boots and things, then took her by the arm, and she suffered herself to be led into the bedroom. "You sit," I said firmly, and went for the dresser.
"Ain't you a commanding manly man?"
She batted her eyelashes, smiling to reveal her bloody teeth. I felt slightly queasy at the sight.
"Whoa,"
she barked in a slow, deep voice.
"Bow, fucking wow."
"Oh, shut up," I grumbled, waving dismissively as I crouched at one end and heaved, groaning as I lifted it onto its side. As it finally went over the tipping point, Cassidy's revolver barked and I reflexively ducked. I heard a small thud outside, then a second louder thud reverberated through the floor that made me jump as a dresser fell, kicking up dust. I looked back and Cassidy shrugged sheepishly, giving me a vampiric smile. I walked the dresser to the window, closed it, then retrieved our oil lamp and another chair to jam the bedroom door with. The din from outside had grown. It was like a pack of coyotes crossed with mating cougars. I lit the lamp and asked, "If you aren't gonna sit, can you push the bed against the wall?" I put my belt on as she did, properly holstering my .38, then brought out my meager medical kit and withdrew a needle and thread. She sat on the edge of the dirty mattress and eyed the needle warily as it glinted in the lamplight.
Fuck that. Fuck that."
I tossed her a flask of high-proof whiskey. "Cowgirl up, Cass." I held the needle in the flame of my flip lighter, which I reserve for such occasions as this when matches just ain't snazzy enough. She unscrewed the top and sniffed, wrinkling her retrousse nose. "Woof." She ran her fingers through her black locks and shot some back. She whimpered as she swallowed, holding a hand to her mouth.
"It stings like fucking hornets of flame," she gasped.
"It'll sting less the more you drink, darling."
"No fucking way."
She shook her head.
"I'd rather take the fucking needle unadulterated."
"Your choice," I shrugged. She took another look as I ran thread through the eye.
"Are you sure this is gonna do me any good?"
she asked, holding up the flask. "Well, I don't know. I've never been drunk, so I can't speak on its effects. You can't be a master at everything, so sometimes you just gotta rely on folk wisdom and street knowledge. So, yes, drink." She sighed and slammed the rest. Roughly 10 shots worth of something I'd once used to help start a fire.
"Fucking fuck my ass with a trench club,"
she rasped with her face distorted grotesquely, pacing around like she was wired, stomping her feet.
Great spirit, God, it's like a fire ant colony's burrowing in my fucking mouth.
I sat on the bed and scooted to the corner, back to the wall. Keep spitting filth like that and you'll get an infection. I gestured for her to come over. Did that animal do that to you?
Oh, the fucking barbed wire,
she coughed, crawling over and sitting between my legs, back against the headboard. Well, shit. I hope she wouldn't get tetanus.
Well, ain't this cuddly cozy,
she said as she situated herself. Don't be weird, I said, and she snickered. I'm real sorry about this, Cass, I lied, and rubbed her cuts with an alcohol-saturated cloth. She shrieked and elbowed me painfully right in the solar plexus.
Fuck! You bastard!
Fresh blood welled. How is that more painful than getting your face lacerated? I asked, rubbing where she hit me with my wrist to avoid smearing her blood on my shirt.
It's not, it just fucking stings,
she hissed through grit teeth, pressing her eyes closed, legs together, and arms tight to her sides with clenched fists. Well, that's too bad. I looked at her legs. They were dirty, and her knees were scraped on the red earth, but they wouldn't need alcohol, just water. You need to start sleeping with more clothes on.
You discussed this previously. It's fucking uncomfortable. How many times I gotta explain this to you? I'm not a friggin' carpetbagger like you, if you recall,
she said irately. It has nothing to do with climate. You're just a craven city slicker. You're in the wild now. Things like this happen, and you can't be tearing off into the brush while nude.
I am not fucking naked,
she said insolently, slurring her speech a bit. You're near enough that your legs easily could have been torn up. And how do you like to run into poison ivy like that? She looked ready to argue, as was her wont, but hesitated as she thought on what I'd said. Like my own, her legs were well muscled from our incessant bicycling, but with how little body fat she had, they looked creepily like cordage under her skin. Like this, I could see how her hip bones looked like handlebars, and her ribs like waddle under a blood-stained tank top. She wore men's briefs and had run a length of cord through them like a belt and cinched it tight about her waist. I'd lost a lot of weight in the time since we'd ran away, and often felt niggling concern whenever I examined myself. I had to put 4 new holes in my belt. My shirts hung off me. I had to sew buttons to keep my sleeves rolled up. I could feel my strength waning along with my weight. I felt scrawny, but she was skinny even before we left. I always stayed dressed to hide myself. I wish she'd do the same. I didn't want to see. I listened to you in Lightning City because you knew better than I there. But here? I gestured to our surroundings. I know more. So just listen to me, all right? I'm not trying to push you around. You don't know what the fuck you're doing and refuse to take well-intentioned advice, I shouted, completely frazzled, and she frowned at me, pink in the cheeks. Just stifle while I suture you, or I'll sew your sewer mouth shut while I'm at it. All right, you cantankerous son of a bitch, she conceded begrudgingly, not meeting my gaze. Fucking up to it then while I'm fuckered up from that fucking kerosene you pressed me into drinking. The cut ran from just below her bottom lip to beside her nose, splitting her lips entirely. The second scratch ran parallel, going slightly further up her cheek, but it was shallow and wouldn't need any help from me. All right, let me see them fangs of yours. I gently parted her lips to check her teeth, which miraculously were unharmed. However, her split lips slid freely of each other like swing doors at a saloon. She flinched away and looked up at me with wide, nervous eyes. The dark circles, so much like a raccoon's mask, made her look skull-like. You'll be fine, I said as reassuringly as I could. She'd definitely scar. I don't feel fine, she slurred. I feel like my face got copiously motherfucked by a fence. It's shameful. Your face did get motherfucked. Stifle so I can unfuck it. Do you think I'll still look pretty? She batted her eyelashes. I said, not knowing how to answer that diplomatically when she was obviously addled. Still? came to mind, but that was too mean. For now, at least. She elbowed me again, and I nearly stabbed her. Then I did stab her. Ow! She gave me a tragic, wounded look, rubbing her cheek. Knock that shit out. I glared at her, trying to be stern. Okay, she whined. I was just messing with you. Well, don't. Not while I'm sewing your mangled ass mug back together. Fine. Good girl. She glowered, but finally shut up and let me work. I had her bite leather as I washed her deep cut more thoroughly with iodine solution. Then, as gently as I could, I slid the needle through her lip. I hated doing stitches. It always made me squirm inside. She trembled a bit at first, but eventually she relaxed and laid with her jaw clenched and eyes firmly shut as I worked. There, you're all patched up, darling, I said about 10 minutes later. Thank you kindly, she said easily, raising her arm. There was a thunderous bang that sent my ears ringing. Dust and a few splinters fell down on us, and I heard a small, heavy body roll down the roof and fall to the ground outside with a meaty thump. That little fucker was stalking around up there the whole goddamn while, she said in the same conversational tone. I reckon they're fixing to murder us big time. Picking them off only further incentivizes them, I replied through grit teeth. Her shot had been met with a renewed cacophony of yowls and caterwauling. If you can get your pea brain to recall, they needed no fucking incentive, she said. They came with enough malintent to murder us in our fucking sleep, and I'm merely returning their sentiments in 44. It wasn't self-defense, I hissed contemptuously, yanking the gun from her grip. She didn't resist. The intricately engraved barrel was hot to the touch. For fuck's sake, Cass! She looked confused and a little hurt. What in the ever-loving fuck has you so fucking calamistrated? You do, you cack-handed dumbass! Friggin' scooch! I nudged her none too gently and she scooted away. I stood and walked off the musty mattress, still carrying her gun. Frickin' frick, I nearly said, to my shame. The hell are you going? To talk to him, I said, lacing up my boots while staring at the gun on the floor and its well-worn gray walnut grip. What? Her incredulous smile didn't reach her worried eyes. She winced. I'm gonna talk to him, to at least make an attempt to resolve this frickin' brouhaha without further bloodletting. You joshing me? Nope. I stood and loosened my knife in its scabbard. You joshed me, faking your inebriation. No fakery. I'm just that good a fucking shot, but Jack, you're kinda fucking scaring me here, she said, chuckling nervously. I know your wits are pretty dim, but... I glared back at her, thin and bloodied and looking afraid. She stopped talking. I set the gun on the edge of the bed. Don't fucking use that, I said, pointing a blood-stained finger at the gun. Unless one comes crawling through the window or you hear me getting mauled. I turned my back to her and set the chair aside. And wash your knees so they don't get infected. I don't really know what the fuck I did to piss you off this badly, but I'm sorry, she said earnestly. It's fine. It ain't your fault your mom drank so much while pregnant, I muttered flatly. She gaped, at a loss. What the fuck? I closed the door behind me and, despite myself, grinned. Then I paused, surveying the room and tapping a foot as I collected my thoughts. I took a deep breath. This was a gamble, but so was waking up in the morning. After adding more fuel to the fire, I rearranged the table so the long side was facing the oven and put the remaining 2 chairs at the heads. The dry logs caught quickly, and soon the room was filled with flickering firelight. I crept to the door, grabbed the chair, and slowly pushed it open. The creatures went as silent as the grave. They stared, and my heart thundered. Gingerly, I towed the screen door and propped it open, then backed inside, keeping my eyes on the opening. Beyond was black. There wasn't a sound but the wind and creaking timbers, save the faint rustle and jangling of a belt buckle as Cassidy tugged her pants on. Not even insects. I took a deep breath, calming myself, and started to sing, dancing a slow waltz. Hello out there, I want you to know I'm here all alone. No tears, no laugh, no protection from the bird beginning to grow. The bird beginning to grow. Eventually, I heard a slight creak outside the door. Hello out there, I want you to know. One pillow in my bed. 2 rooms, 3 chairs, 1 spoon and the bowl. The bird beginning to crow. The bird beginning to crow. An animal crept across the threshold, and its wide, staring eyes locked onto me as I slowly swept my feet around, then danced aside, waltzed again, continuing the song, hoping my movements and singing would distract and disarm the creature. Please don't take that from me. It's mine, not yours. It's so hard to see. Please don't take that from me. It's mine, not yours. It's so hard to see. It watched me curiously, and it retracted its long, lethally sharp claws. The creature leapt upon the table and crouched, sitting with its long fingered paws beneath it. Its arms and legs bulged with powerful muscles, tensed and ready to explode with violence at any moment. Are you willing to speak with me? I asked, standing behind the chair. I casually rested my wrist on the hilt of my heavy knife, modeled on the Vinlandic sax. The creature regarded me with its yellow, slit-pupiled eyes. It had a round, almost felid face with a blunt muzzle brimming with fangs. Its torso was long and thick, covered with wiry umber fur and ending with a ringed bottle-brush tail. For a time, the beast replied in a growling rasp. Of what do you sing, interloper? Loneliness, I said as I carefully sat at the opposite end of the table. And the loss of innocence. It was one of my favorites. Thank you for being willing to talk. Why do you wish to speak? The creature's shaggy tail moved from side to side like a pendulum. I want to know what we've done to provoke your ire, and if we can perhaps come to some peaceable resolution. I tried to keep a poker face, not knowing what expressions would be considered threatening. We defend ourselves and our territory from interlopers, the beast growled. We strike before struck. I can understand that, I said. Interlopers hunt us. The creature thumped its tail on the rough tabletop. Is that not what you are and why you have come? They trap us, they shoot us, not to be sustained, they take our tails. Interlopers flaunt perverse defiance of the natural order. We came here for shelter. In the morning, we will be on our way, I said. It bore its fangs, swishing its tail. Deceit, it hissed. You dwell within a predator's lair. The swishing kicked up lingering dust in little clouds. I regarded the creature warily, and it suddenly came to me, like the obvious to the slow. You're a Tailypo. That is what interlopers call us. It snarled, its tail moving more agitatedly. Indeed. You have my word. We did not come for your tails. We didn't even know you were here until you attacked. But the female interloper did take a tail. Without looking away from me, the Tailypo slowly pointed to the door of Cassidy's room, a long claw slowly extending from the finger to punctuate the threat. The tail thumped the table, and the strike reverberated through me like a muffled bass drum I could feel rather than hear. I covered my mouth involuntarily. Shit. I breathed into my hands, my heart thudding in my chest. Of all the things she could have shot, she had to have shot the tail off a Tailypo. The Tailypo regarded me coolly with its piercing yellow eyes. After a moment, I lowered my hands to the table, palms flat on the rough surface. Her hat was taken first, I said, going out on a limb. A note of desperation had crept into my voice. It is significant to her as your tails are to you. The tail was taken in the fight to reclaim her hat, and she has it back. As a gesture of goodwill, we'll return the tail and promise to depart tomorrow at the crack of dawn and never return. The Tailypo said nothing and simply stared with its piercing yellow eyes, tail sweeping back and forth, regarding me. I felt embarrassed under the scrutiny. I was compelled to speak. That is all we can offer in restitution. But I will warn you, I will kill to preserve my life, same as you. Cassidy is like a sister to me, and I will kill for her as well. I do not wish to. I take no joy from the act, and I will hate myself. I already do. But mark my words, I will. I tried to discern something, anything, in the Tailypo's look, but it was utterly inscrutable. It could have been a statue, save for the tail sweeping back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and again. Cass? I called, not breaking my eye contact. But before I could say more, the door opened. She cautiously approached and lightly threw the tail onto the table, then stepped back, standing behind and to the side of me. I've got my hat, you have the tail, so we square?
You took lives, we have not,
the Tailypo said evenly. Sweat ran down my back. She met its glare with one of her own. They started it, I ended it. It was justified. I could tell her self-assured tone was false, and so could the Tailypo.
Interlopers are many, we a few. Have you slain one of your own interloper?
The Tailypo asked. Yeah, Cassidy replied uneasily. More than one, each justified. Some more than others. I won't delude myself that I have a clear conscience. The yellow eyes returned to me.
And have you?
I swallowed. I have, and to tell you the truth, I don't much differentiate. The Tailypo looked me long and hard in the eyes, then Cassidy, and then it took the tail in its own and hopped down from the table. Can you reattach it? I asked as I crossed the threshold. The Tailypo looked back.
There is nobody left to reattach it to.
And then padded out into the night, silent as a ghost. I went to the doors and hurriedly closed them, jamming the inner with the chair before looking back to Cassidy. She sat down like she just summited a peak. Care to fill me in on just what the hell that was about? She asked wearily, rubbing at her mouth. Don't do that, I cautioned her, and she gave me the bird, but stopped rubbing. Tailypo tails are natural magic conductors, so you can get a stronger effect than silver without the fine craftsmanship. Poachers hunt them for their tail bones to make talismans and wands, and there's such a high demand that the Tailypos are nearing extinction. I didn't know, she said in a small voice. It's okay. I brought the other chair around to sit next to her and took her hand. Her eyes were red and she was stubbornly fighting back tears. It was probably using some kind of magic to gauge how honest we were, or to read our emotions. That, or we're the luckiest fools in the world. I'm glad you found a way to avoid killing more of them. Me too. She sniffed and looked up at me. You really think of me like a sister? I shrugged and nodded, flushing. That's really fucking sweet. I was always glad I didn't have siblings. She lightly punched my arm. Get bent, Jack. I looked down. She'd lost so much, and it had taken a toll on her body, mind, and likely her very soul. She didn't have much more to lose before there was nothing left. If I sat by and let that happen, what would there be left of me? Her pain hurt. Hey, Cass. I squeezed her hand and she looked at me. Sorry for giving you grief about your buckle. No, you were right. She gave a sad little sigh, and it made me want to hug her and plead for forgiveness. I thought on it some, and I realized I was acting the rapscallion, she reluctantly admitted, and I gave a dry snort. So that was the source of the sorrow. And I'd have the breeze blowing through me as soon as they laid eyes on it. I'm glad you're at least as reasonable as a woodland creature. Tomorrow, after blackjack, she said, glaring at me. After blackjack, I nodded deferentially. I'll peel the enamel off, so at a distance it looks like a regular ass buckle. By the time anyone notices the embossing, we should have ascertained if they're the type to shoot over fucking trivialities as opposed to judgments of character. And if they are, I'll shoot them first. Not kill, but merely fucking shoot so they heed my words. Merely shoot, she says. I chuckled. She put a hand over her heart and solemnly declared, I shall call my version the Grey Rebel flag, a symbol of anti-government, anti-bullshit, anarchic, pure fucking colorless rebellion. That's a swell idea, Cass.